and I'm going to go more philosophical on this. I think just the U.S. For years up until the shale gas revolution, the U.S. was largely energy dependent. So energy efficiency meant a lot to the U.S. because they have to find they wanted to make sure that they could afford their energy. They weren't too beholden to other providers and such. Also, the U.S., frankly, is a more entrepreneurial, more business savvy environment country. I mean, that's why they maybe take a more aggressive view on energy efficiency and finding savings for consumers and such and what have you. I want to, as to why that doesn't happen in Canada, I always go back to when I covered the Ontario electricity industry in the early 2000s, and I'm now dating myself. This was back in when the Conservative government tried to change the electricity market. I just find that there's a thinking among politicians and even among citizens that Canadians have especially what I found in parts of Ontario, that they believe they had a God-given right to cheap hydro and that nothing should interfere with that. So I think there's always been maybe a perception or a historical view that we have abundant energy sources, so we don't have to be. I don't think there's been any motivation. I think that's part of the problem as well. I think, and I can only speak from my Ontario experience, because I think they're one of the reasons why market liberalization didn't work was because I think people and politicians and voters just thought that they had a right to cheap hydro, as they did back when Adam Beck found. Dating all the way back to the foundation of Ontario Hydro. That is my view about.
I was so struck in watching the Obama speech, remember in June, where he had the sort of little thing about Keystone that everyone reported on. But throughout that speech, I was so struck watching him that there wasn't a lot in that speech that Prime Minister Harper could not have said as well. If you actually look at what Obama has done, it isn't a big long list. He hasn't exactly turned things around. He hasn't passed a whole lot of sort of measures in the United States that are going to be great for climate change or energy efficiency. Yet he talks about it. People believe that he believes in doing something about it because he makes speeches about it at Georgetown University. That's the difference with here. I just think that this Prime Minister just doesn't do that, and he could have taken that speech, put in a few more different Canadian references, and made that speech himself at some other university in Canada. He just won't. So it's too bad. I think in Canada, the thing that's going to drive this will be like the high gas prices for cars, right? So, like the more the price of gas goes up, the more people want to trade in their old car and get one that is fuel efficient. That has driven a lot of the change. Sadly, right now, I think with all the new natural gas coming online, and cheap gas, that people are going to be able to heat their homes if they have access to gas pretty cheaply for the next little while. But, at some point, that's going to change. And then people are going to be looking for different ways to heat their buildings. It's going to impact their bottom line. It's going to become a business consumer issue then because of cost. That will be what drives it. And then governments will act.
John?
I think Paul made a really good point about the sort of mindset of consumers. I think it was a tragedy that the market liberalisation didn't happen in Ontario. We saw what the government response was under the McGuinty government, and it's been a disaster. I mean, I covered that 2011 election. We visited a solar plant. They were happily making these panels, all of which the components were all shipped in from China. And the next day, somebody phoned me and said, you should go back to that factory because this was a photo op and they've laid everybody off. And
Is that in Windsor?
No, it was in Toronto. And we sent a reporter there the next day and the place was shuttered. I mean, it was just uneconomic what happened, and obviously we were paying way too much for solar. I think my point is that the market will drive us in this direction. I mean, if you look at IKEA at the moment, IKEA has made energy efficiency a centerpiece of its business. Canadian competitors to IKEA are going to have to respond to this in some way. I think everything, last time I was in IKEA, it's all energy efficiency, light bulbs, and everything that they're doing is geared towards making the home more energy efficient. And, governments have a certain amount of sway in this. Provincial government, probably more than the federal government. I think one thing you may find today is that this federal government does not like interfering in areas of provincial jurisdiction, and it will just go, well, this has nothing to do with us. But as you would probably expect the National Post to say, let the market decide.
Actually, I forgot to make this point when we were talking about why Canada and the U.S., why it's different. I forgot to make this point, and I wanted to. When you have a government going around talking about how Canada is this energy superpower, you sort of get a mindset that we've got abundant supply of energy everywhere. There's no need to be energy efficient. There's no, why should we care about saving, trying to do our best to conserve when, we're being told by our own policymakers and leaders that we are the greatest energy producer and one of the greatest energy producers in the world. I mean, I think that's, I wanted to just, I know that's completely off topic, Matt, but I just
No, it's
wanted
actually-
I think that is part of the reason why maybe conservation and efficiency, these issues are not top of mind, because we're being given a different narrative by our leading policymakers.